Paul Joseph Watson. PJW, Pajama Watson, imagine my shock. Put out a video here just under a month ago. Things that didn't end racism. This should be good. Because, as far as I know, the only people claiming... now, I know that a lot of libs claim that the election of Obama back in 2008 was the end of racism, but I don't think anyone actually believed that. And if nothing else, the election of Donald Trump thoroughly disproved that. So let's see what Mr. Watson has to say here. So, Paul, take it away.
It's been over a week since Lego stopped advertising Lego policemen, and racism still exists. Unbelievable. The sets and products in question include the Lego City Police.
Yeah. No one said that this would get rid of racism. The whole point was to stop propagandizing police to children. And yeah, Ruby Aries, you're right. Honestly, Joe Biden is the most progressive president since FDR. That, if he gets elected in November, that will likely be true. Yeah, I agree there.
Station, fire station, police dog unit, patrol car, fireplane, mobile command center, police highway arrest, and more. Absolutely stunning that the dark legacy of this toy fire station has been bravely expunged from our consciousness. Yet African American men are still finding themselves engaged in violent confrontations with cops. Didn't end racism. It's been over a week since Little Britain, a TV show that satirized every demographic in the country, partly to highlight the small-minded attitudes of bigots.
Fish and chips.
Do it again.
Fish and chips.
Do it again.
Oh, forget it.
Must be some sort of dish that we don't get over here.
It was removed from on-demand services. Yet bigotry still exists. Didn't end bigotry. It's been over a week since...
Holy shit, Paul Joseph Watson is dumber than I thought. And that's saying something. I thought Paul Joseph Watson was really dumb. No one thought these... Even if some smooth-brained lib thought that removing these would end racism, it's obviously not going to happen right away.
HBO erased Gone with the Wind from its platform, a move that was so courageously anti-racist that it erased the first black woman in history to win an Oscar. Didn't end racism. Broadcaster Sky placed political correctness trigger warnings on multiple movies on its on-demand platform. This film has outdated attitudes, language, and cultural depictions which may cause offense today. A film that was made in 2019 doesn't matter.
And based off a story that is significantly older and still makes use of those tropes they're referring to. Yeah. You know, this is the thing that a lot of people of Paul Joseph Watson's persuasion seem to get into. This idea that trigger warnings or content warnings are somehow like the domain of snowflakes. No. They're literally there so that people are aware of the content in the piece. Some people, particularly when it comes to trigger warnings, some people have very negative reactions to certain things. Like, I imagine that if someone was sexually assaulted, reading or watching a sexual assault take place might be a little harsh for them. They might have a panic attack or anxiety, or it may just be very, very unpleasant and uncomfortable for them. You know, we don't have this issue when someone says, "Oh, I don't like action movies. I don't like because they make me uncomfortable. I don't like them," or what have you. But if the movies themselves put a trigger warning, "Hey, this contains graphic depictions of sexual assault," or "This contains graphic violence," suddenly this is snowflake culture. This is people being offended by these depictions? No, you morons. We're literally just making sure that the people who want to enjoy this media and keep in mind this is almost always on optional entertainment media, are able to actually enjoy them. And I don't want to assign too much altruism or positive thoughts to the streaming services or movie producers which make these films or put these warnings on, because they're doing it so they don't get sued. Like, let's be honest here. They're not doing it out of some compassion for people. They're doing it so they don't get sued. But they're also doing it so that more people might be willing to enjoy their show, because having the warning can allow people to prepare themselves for it if they choose to watch it anyway. Like, again, to go back to my example talking about someone who was sexually assaulted, if they know something like that is going to happen, they can prepare themselves. Or if they see the warning signs, all right, I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick. Like, right? This makes sense to people, right? I'm not being dumb here. I think this is rational for people, right?
Matter didn't end racism. Multi-millionaire Premiership footballers took a knee to acknowledge the huge number.
And again, none of this, especially content warnings or trigger warnings, none of these were intended to end racism. We're just trying to bring attention to it so that people can work on it. Ending racism is going to be a multi-generational effort, which will take active participation and effort from everyone involved. This is not something that's going to go away in a weekend. This is going to take active participation.
Numbers of black people being killed by police in the UK. Didn't end racism. This mob of hundreds of Black Lives Matter protesters following Peter Hitchens because he expressed a different opinion.
Actually, I want to look up that statistic. UK police killing statistics. Okay. I fully expect it to be low because they actually require some real training for their police as opposed to America. But yeah, this okay. And the footballers kneeling for this could have been talking about not just police killing, but police brutality, which just because they don't kill people doesn't mean it's not brutal. Just doesn't mean there's not brutality that takes place there. And also remember that, from what I understand, most police are not armed all the time in the UK. So, yeah. The number of armed police was just over 6.6 thousand. Yeah. So, okay, so he wasn't wrong there. But again, they may. I don't know about the footballers. They may have been kneeling for general police brutality or police killings throughout the world. Whatever. It's still a symbolic move that it is appreciated, even if it's just symbolic.
Didn't end racism. This dude kicking a white guy in the face while shouting Black Lives Matter didn't end racism. This tweet rightly denouncing dieting as a form of white supremacy, despite getting over 164,000 likes, didn't end racism. Mike Gundy reading an apology script that looked more like a hostage video to spinelessly grovel to repent for the atrocious sin of wearing an OAN t-shirt didn't end racism. Multi-millionaire celebrities taking responsibility.
So his whole point here is that these actions aren't ending racism, so they're pointless. And while many of these are pointless symbolic gestures by libs, I'll grant you, that doesn't mean that they don't that they aren't part of ending racism. they're bringing attention to the issue. So I guess calling them pointless is toothless is the better adjective to use there. They're not pointless, but they are toothless. They're just symbolic gestures of. I hesitate to call it solidarity, but of understanding the issues and where it's coming from.
Responsibility for racism.
There are more celebrities in this video than Okay. This video is going to get copyright claimed. I just know it. Fuck you, Paul.
And racism. Merriam-Webster agreeing to change the dictionary definition of the word racism after a single person complained didn't end racism.
Wait, what? Okay. Race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities. And the racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. Okay. So what was the... Okay. Is revising its entry on racism after a recent college graduate in Missouri, inspired by the protests and debates about what it means to be racist, urged editors to make changes. It contains 3 sections. Defines racism as a belief that race is the primary determinant. Okay. A doctrine, right. An editor said in an interview that the editors were working to revise the online entry for racism after the recent graduate. A series of emails stating her case. The entry has not been revised in decades, adding that it was not a new division of the word's meaning, but an improvement on the wordings. Ms. Mitchum, hey, from here in Des Moines, nice. Ms. Mitchum had noticed in discussions about racism that white people sometimes defended their arguments by cutting and pasting the definition from the dictionary. Wrote to the editors to argue that the entry should be revised to better reflect how systemic racism was in society. It's not only prejudice against a certain race or the color of a person's skin, as it states in your dictionary. It is both prejudice combined with social and institutional power. It is a system of advantage based on skin color. Okay. So this is not one random person complaining and them caving. This is someone with a degree. Let's see. Well, I don't know if she has a relevant degree, but she made her case that the language needs to be updated. From the dictionary would revise the entry after the editorial staff discussed and agreed more nuance was needed. Mr. Chambers said that they also plan to revise the entry of other words that are related to racism. Okay. So yeah. The revision will sharpen the language in the second section to better illustrate the way racism can be systemic and to include some examples. What he said was to make the entry's wording less opaque. So yeah. A doctrine or political program based on the assumption of racism and designed to execute its principles, a political or social system. Okay. As usual, Paul Joseph Watson talking out his ass about how racism, a company caving to complaints from one person is actually much more nuanced than that, and this person basically just pointing out an issue.
The UCLA professor put on leave because he refused to allow black students extra time to take exams if they were upset over George Floyd didn't end racism. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's vocal denunciations of Donald Trump's racism and their vehement support for Black Lives Matter didn't end racism. The fact that Hillary and Obama ordered the bombing of Libya, which resulted in countless black people literally being sent to concentration camps and sold as slaves, a practice that had previously been punishable by death under Gaddafi, yeah, that doesn't matter. Didn't end racism. Lewis Hamilton, who is paid £40 million a year by Mercedes, a firm which made vast profits from slavery, demanding racist symbols around the world be removed, didn't end racism. Chick-fil-A CEO Dan Cathy saying all white Christians should repent for racism while kneeling down and shining this rapper's shoes didn't end racism.
Toothless, symbolic gestures will not end racism. No one said they would. This is fucking stupid. This is just 7 minutes of him pointing out toothless gestures that no one said would end racism, that didn't end racism, because that wasn't the fucking point.
All these
If we could all hold hands and chant together about the sanctity of human life, and that would end racism, hooray. But it's gonna take more effort than that. Everyone fucking knows that. I'm actually shocked at this because I'm pretty sure the conservative line is that racism doesn't exist anymore except as individual people.
fast food joints apologizing for, I don't know, racism. Didn't end racism. Bank of America handing over $1 billion to Black Lives Matter, proving as if there was any doubt that BLM is an organic, noble, and pure cause. Didn't end racism.
Because I guarantee this is Bank of America trying to buy BLM, and doesn't seem like it worked. But also, this is going to be a huge PR coup for Bank of America, who, in case you didn't know, Paul, doesn't exactly have a great reputation here in the good old colonies. That means that they can talk about how they supported Black Lives Matter. Again, a pretty toothless gesture, a symbolic move to support Black Lives Matter that doesn't actually involve any real change, but did put $1 billion in capital into Black Lives Matter that they can use for their own agenda.
Maybe racism still exists because the BBC reversed a decision to remove a 45-year-old episode of the sitcom Fawlty Towers because it contained racial slurs. The fact that the slurs were uttered by a character who is portrayed as an out-of-touch elderly racist doesn't matter. Context doesn't matter. Now a whole new generation of racists.
I'm trying to remember if John Cleese was the good Monty Python guy or not. I'm pretty sure he is. I don't think he's come out with some shitty takes. But it said in the subtext there that he said removing it was stupid, and I agree. Removing 40-year-old episodes where a character who is explicitly portrayed as explicitly portrayed negatively as an old, out-of-touch racist, using those words, that's fine. Because we don't want to erase racism from history. We want to stop people from practicing it, both personally and systemically.
Are going to be radicalized by seeing John Cleese do that funny walk. Maybe banning that would have ended racism. William Shakespeare wrote several plays which depict Jews and blacks in a very negative, stereotypical fashion. Hello, racism department.
So for everybody's peace of mind, we burn it.
But it's important to not get...
I hope no one is talking about burning Shakespeare, because I will piss on that fire to put it out. I will. Don't come after Shakespeare, babe. Yeah, there's definitely racist, anti-Semitic, misogynist passages in Shakespeare. It's 600 goddamn years old. Like, we can enjoy something that is that old because it's that good, even with these problematic elements. Because again, the issue with racism is when you make an argument. This goes back to the edgy joke argument. Number 1 rule of edgy jokes, gotta be funny. Number 2 rule, don't make an argument. This is the thing that a lot of these shitty comedians who get these Netflix specials with titles like Triggered or Silenced or Canceled or whatever don't understand. If you want to make edgy jokes, that's fine. As long as they're funny and they don't perpetuate racism or misogyny or any other negative stereotype. You can make jokes about black people as long as your joke doesn't reinforce the idea that they're stupid, violent criminals. You can make jokes about women as long as you don't perpetuate misogynist stereotypes. You can make jokes about men as long as you don't perpetuate that they're violent, stupid idiots. These jokes are fine as long as they're funny and don't make an argument. That's where a lot of people fuck up. They make jokes that reinforce or reify these stereotypes, and that's where the problem lies. Like, we watched the Dave Chappelle thing here on stream a couple weeks ago. He said some yikesy things if you're some snowflake lib, but he never made an argument against marginalized communities. His edgy jokes were funny and didn't reinforce these stereotypes. That's the difference. That's when it's okay.
Get too downhearted and realize we can do this, guys. We can still end racism, maybe by supporting the founder of the MOBO Awards' attempt to pressure the government into tackling racism in the music industry will end racism. Because just like the NBA, black people are notoriously underrepresented in the music industry, maybe by preventing tens of thousands of rugby fans from singing Swing Low Sweet Chariot, a song dedicated to celebrating the abolition of slavery, a song that was banned by the Nazis as undesired and harmful. Maybe banning that will end racism. Maybe by toppling the statue of former...
That one's a little... Like, yeah, it's an old spiritual hymn that was sung by slaves while they were working. That's the origin of Swing Low Sweet Chariot, in case you didn't have that in your grade school music class. But the article there said they didn't know about the connection to slavery, and given that it was British rugby, I have no problem believing that it was probably something someone brought over and, with, completely out of context, became a tradition. There's nothing about Swing Low Sweet Chariot which is inherently racist or reinforcing of slavery or racism. It's literally, if I remember the lyrics correctly, basically just someone crying out for death, basically.
The British Prime Minister Charles II.
And if we want to ban or demonize all music which causes people, which is basically people calling out for death, then whoo boy, you got a lot of music you got to ban then.
Earl of Grey will end racism. The fact that he literally oversaw the abolition of slavery in Britain and devoted 40% of the Treasury's annual income to freeing slaves. Yeah,
Here we go with Paul Joseph Watson once again citing his own article about how whatever he's talking about. This is so Paul Joseph Watson. Leftists want to topple statue of British Prime Minister whose government ended slavery. I'll bet there are other reasons why they want to remove him. Perhaps he participated in imperialism, almost certainly if he was a British Prime Minister. Perhaps, despite ending slavery, he was racist. Again, statues are not about history, they are about honoring people. And if someone didn't do something worth honoring, why do they have a statue?
Of the Treasury's annual income to freeing slaves. Yeah, that doesn't matter. Maybe toppling him will end racism, but don't give up hope. Uncle Ben's has announced that they'll be changing their brand identity to, quote, end racial biases and injustices, literally erasing the character of an African-American man who was put on the packaging in the first place to celebrate a black dude called Frank Brown who ran a successful restaurant in Chicago. Maybe that will end racism. Maybe we can force Kellogg's to eliminate...
The problem with things like Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima is that they bring to mind certain tropes which can be offensive to black people. Just because you aren't offended by it doesn't mean some people aren't. And I know that that's actually a pretty poor argument. because everything offends someone. But if you have a society, if you have a section of society who is traditionally marginalized, who makes arguments about how a given mascot or symbol is offensive to them or furthers their marginalization, maybe pay attention to that. Maybe listen to that.
Eliminate the Cocoa Pops monkey. Maybe that will end racism. I mean, they use the exact same monkey for white chocolate Cocoa Pops as well. That doesn't matter. Maybe banning the Cocoa Pops monkey will end racism. Maybe we've really got a chance.
Fuck this. We're done. Fucking Paul. No one is claiming that these things are going to end racism, but they help to limit and mitigate the spread of racism and to help reduce the normalization of certain racist tropes. Like with Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima, they remove the trope of the wise black housekeeper who is a slave, but is still a source of wisdom or whatever in these stories. And there's a little bit of yikes about that. The Cocoa Pops monkey, this is Paul Joseph Watson dog whistling, because, of course, monkey is a racial slur for black people. And they're cocoa, so they're black. But there's nothing particularly black-coded about that mascot from what I could see. Maybe in the past there was, but nothing really bad about that. So, yeah, this is just Paul Joseph Watson being reactionary, as usual. Fucking yikes. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to like, share, and leave a comment because it helps me. Subscribe and ring that bell to help you. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.